back a bit and tell me how you got here from where you came from to get here.
So you want the short, politically correct version or the real version?
Definitely the real version.
Okay. I think I'll do the short, real version.
Okay.
Short, real version. I was raised to be aware of energy, that there's something more in the world, something bigger. Not in any religion of any sort, just being in the world and actually knowing that there's more to this than just what I can touch and what I can see with my physical eyes. And however, I wasn't given any instruction in this. I was just sort of, oh, by the way, this is the way it is. Have fun. And it was a little bizarre. How do you work with that? My mom had done some playful things with cards, with playing cards, with, okay, choose my card, and doing the whole you're supposed to figure it out from the mind thing. And I sucked at that. I was really bad. And it was always a bit of a disappointment to her. So I felt, okay, this is an area where I'm supposed to be excelling, and apparently I'm not. So that was the very beginning of it. Then life went on, and I just kind of, my friends weren't into it. I tried out several churches, just because everybody else is doing that. I wanted to be like everyone else, just understand what the world is, like your average kid. And this is the short version. So in the end, I ended up not going to churches. Had some bad experiences with just wasn't good for me. And then life kind of went on. I went to college, took a bunch of classes on family and child development, on psychology, writing, philosophy, all that stuff. And then my parents died, one right after the other. Totally unexpected. Both of them were just really unusual. Stuff for the textbook, kind of unusual. And when that happened, I lost it. I didn't have any kind of direction. This vague direction of there's something more. And by the way, you have to live in here in this world, and go figure it out. Have fun. I really I took a header. I started to get sick, really sick. I had no idea what to do with my life. I was just going downhill fast, and didn't have any family, didn't have any support.
Do you have any brothers and sisters, Dawn?
Nope, no brothers and sisters. Yeah.
Well, that must have. Yeah. Okay. Please continue. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, it sucked. It was really hard. And I started to wonder, what am I doing here? What do I even want to still be here? Because I had gotten very sick, autoimmune cocktail, just every kind of anything you could think of, and so I was just sort of sitting there and just really starting to ponder my mortality, and just really got down to the bottom. And I got finally to the point of stillness. Finally got to that point where I was just blank. It took 27 years or so, and all of that happening. But in that blankness, all of a sudden, I heard a voice that said, "You are she who stands and looks both ways." And I experienced a life review where I got to see all the various different decisions that I'd made, and where I went right or left. And how there was no harm, no foul, no right or wrong. Just these are the choices, these are the repercussions. This is how it played out in your choices. And you are now at a point where you can make another choice. If you continue to stay the way you are, you will continue to get sicker and sicker, and you will die. Pretty straight out. Just like, oh, okay. Or you can see what happens and work for it, and actually try to make changes that are really scary that you haven't wanted to make ever. And so I did. So I started. I started deciding to live every day. And for the first year or so, it was like a constant, okay, I'm going to live. I choose to live. I choose, I choose, I choose. And that's basically where it started. That's where things opened up. And that's the answer to where did it all start.
Right. Thank you. That's really interesting. Well, that makes a lot of things very clear. A very, very interesting answer. But I'd really like to talk more about what happened to you when you were 27, because you're my God, sympathies for your position when your folks died, and you had no brothers and sisters, and you went on as a lot of people might have experienced, you things kind of got worse and worse, I should imagine, for a few years. But then at the age of 27, for no other apparent reason, you said you had a moment of stillness.
Well, my parents died when I was 27.
Right.
I'm
at the same
36
time.
now.
Right.
And my father died in July, and then my mom died in April, the following April. My dad died. It shifted me in a, whoa, he didn't know what he was doing if he's just going to up and die like that. So the masculine principle of how you live in the world was suddenly like, okay, he actually really didn't know what he was doing. It ends up. And then my mom died. She didn't know what she was doing either. And so I think the still point came probably around July, I guess the anniversary of my father's death of the following year. My mom had died April, a couple months, had fallen apart the rest of the way. And then that's when it happened. Right. Yeah. So it wasn't any apparent reason. It was just kind of like shock. And
okay. Then... Still okay. I assume those couple of months of falling apart might have gone on for years, but only a couple of months of falling apart, and then you had a moment of stillness, and you suddenly saw your way, or something became apparent to you, or many things came apparent to you. It sounds like, and you saw this path that you had been on, and choices that you could make. It seems to be in a moment of clarity almost, or you became more clear.
Very clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where did that come from?
I think it was there all along. I think I just finally shut up for a minute. Instead of grabbing and scrambling and freaking out and trying to figure out and logically put together and understand and all the various things that the brain, and especially in the face of trauma, there wasn't anything to fix. It was all gone. And then I'd lost my job. All sorts of stuff started happening where everything fell apart just immediately. Relationships fell apart. Job fell apart. Place I was living fell apart. Everything, health fell apart. It's like, okay, we're just going to disassemble your life until you can finally actually just be here. And where it came from, I see it as a benevolent force, that it is a force of goodness. The sense I got in that you are she who stands and looks both ways, this is a choosing point, was kind. It was real, very, very no holds barred, this is how it is. But it was also just accepting of everything. And if I have a word for unconditional love, it would be acceptance. I've never felt so accepted in my life. And I guess I was sort of on a tipping point of life or death at that point. And I chose life, and I think that's what... Well, that was definitely what was right for me. But that voice accepted me either way. And, yeah.
Well, it's so interesting that you almost as though you lost everything in your life, but then you found something that you'd always had, but it's the most it's so important part of your life. It just came out of nothing, basically, and but seemed to I don't know start you all over, but well, that's quite amazing. The way you talk.
Guess
about
you weren't
it.
prepared for the. Quite prepared for that answer.
I certainly wasn't. If I had a drink of water there now, I'd probably be reaching for it.
You put it on the to-do list.
Yeah. Because you talk about before you were grasping and analysing and looking for things before. That's where I am now. It's because I'm trying to grasp this and analyse this, whereas all you're saying is it is what it is. Just be. You learnt to just be. And
I did, and I forgot, and I learned again, and I forgot, and I'm still forgetting and learning again. It's a continual thing. But once I experienced it, I remembered what it felt like, and I remembered where I want to be. Having experienced it once, it's like, oh, that's what I want. Okay, I want that clarity, that sense of being really awake and just being with everything. I think you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think I do. I think I probably don't experience it exactly the way you do, but I still, it certainly chimes with me. It certainly it means a great deal, and your story as well is just amazing. But why don't we carry on and say, well, you were 27, and because I assume that you then decided to, I don't know, help other people or get trained and stuff like that. Where did your journey take you after that age?
Well, I was 27, and I would say I had the world wisdom of a 10-year-old, maybe. People had always been taking care of me, and they were gone. It was sort of like I'd never left home in a way. Even though I went to college, got a job, got a degree, everything else, I still felt like a kid. So in my falling apart, I kind of just put my hands up. I was like, okay, all right, if I'm going to do this whole living thing, then you're going to have to take care of me, because so there's the whole surrender part. What happened then? I joined a group on lightworker.com. It was the last thing that my mother had been into before she died, and it was the last thing that I could hold on to. She'd said, look at this, and before she died, I was like, whatever. I was just out there, woo-woo, whatever. I'm here in the real world. This doesn't apply to me. Well, it suddenly applied to me when my world wasn't there anymore. And so I went there, and there's The Beacons of Light by Steve Rother. Began reading that. And I realized I needed to change everything. And I was really sick at this point as well. No income. I was sick. Nobody taking care of me. And I was alive. That's the only thing I knew for sure. It's that I was actually choosing to live. And I needed to find a reason. As without one, I wouldn't be able to keep putting one foot in front of the other in that space. And so I did end up choosing to help other people. Had always felt that there was this desire, this need to shift something in the world. I was born with it. It's just always been with me, that there's so much more. Even with my mother telling me there's more to the world, and I wasn't able to understand. But I'd always felt in my heart this thing. We're kind of getting to the empathic portion at this point. My mom told me one of her first memories of me being empathic was, I think I was 2 or 3. I'd learned how to speak. And she said I used to say things about people all the time where I'd say that person's smiling, but they're crying inside, and I don't understand. And that's kind of been the ongoing thing where I never quite understood how there's a public face and there's a real face and there's a different face with this person and what is real and who am I actually. All of these questions came to the forefront as really needing an answer now. There isn't any more waiting. We're out of time. Got to figure this out now. So reading in Lightworker and joined an online spiritual community. And I was sick, so I learned energy healing to try to help myself. So I didn't have any income, no money. So I got to help myself. There's no insurance, no nothing. But I believe in this energy thing. I've always felt it. So let's see if we can harness it to do something with it. And that's when the whole world really opened up. I love it. But I ended up, to continue with the autobiographical portion, I ended up getting rid of everything. Just saying, here, have all my stuff. It suddenly doesn't mean as much. I kept my music, my computer, and I placed my bed and just clothes, and that was it. And everything else went to all the people that I'd known. And I had a friend who was amazing, and we'd known each other forever. His name was Ken McAndrew, and he took me in. He had a house in Virginia. I was in Florida at the time, and he's like, "No, I'll come down. I've still got the 3-story house. I haven't started a family yet, so you're welcome to the top floor, and I'll take care of you while you get back on your feet." And he took me in, and I just stayed there and got back on my feet and learned about energy. Yeah.
Right. Well, shall we start talking about energy then?
Sure.
And empathy, and more about what you're doing now, because I think I've delved enough into the autobiography, or maybe if there's more you want to say, but I'm fascinated about what you do, how you do it, and just I haven't got a good question, Dawn. Just what do you do and how do you do it?
The one thing you learn first with energy is to be comfortable with uncomfortable silences.
That's absolutely fine with me, Dawn.
You gotta get that still space to understand what comes next, if that makes any sense. When you live in the moment instead of planning things out, which I only do sometimes. I'm not a guru. I'm not, believe it or not. Actually, it's pretty easy to believe. I still fade in and out so much with this stuff but at the moment I'm doing my best to live in the now, and in that there's the silence. With what comes next, I would say that in the beginning with that man that I talked about, that my mom said that I could tell that he was smiling on the outside but crying on the inside. In the very beginning, it's kind of an overwhelming feeling. It was uncomfortable for a long time. I would feel everybody's feelings, and everybody's a crazy mess inside most of the time. They're either that or they're very focused on something. And sometimes I would feel the love. Sometimes I would feel the connection and the presence and actually being with each other. But most of the time, people are kind of just off in their own worlds, feeling their emotions, just letting things run rampant and burying them. And I would just feel it. It would just come at me like waves. There's even energy of space. Husband and I took a drive to downtown DC, and we went around the Pentagon where the plane hit, 9/11.
Yeah.
Um, and I felt it. I was like, I wasn't really paying attention to where we are. And he was driving and around. They'd actually rerouted the freeway to make space so that cars can't go that close to the Pentagon anymore. And I was like, what's going on? What am I feeling? And just suddenly feel as if the air pressure got heavy. It's like, oh, we're going around the Pentagon. It's like, oh, okay. That explains a lot. I don't think I'll be visiting the 9/11 New York area. What I'm trying to say is it comes at first as an overwhelming feeling. It's just kind of like somebody turning all the radio stations on at once and then turning up the volume. And just swimming through that, trying to figure out how to go through life. And, I don't go to the mall around Christmas time. I just don't. If you can imagine. So what I did first was become a skilled empath. I worked with Rose Tree. She has books out that I recommend. She's a great teacher. And she kind of taught how to work with empathy, everything is energy. We've learning that with quantum physics especially, that everything in the world is energy. It's just frequencies vibrating at different levels. So thought is energy, emotion is energy, physicality is energy, everything. So basically what an empath is somebody who's sensitive to energy, period. Not emotions necessarily, it's anything. She began us working with flowers, and it was funny. My flower, by the time we got to the flower portion of the training that I was in, had gotten a little wilted, and it looked all like it was dying. And I was freaking out about that a little bit. I didn't want to listen to a dying flower. Are you kidding? But she said, you're going to have to trust me on this one. Just listen to the flower. And so what I did was she had me put my hands around the flower and just close my eyes and tune into the flower. Tune into what it is, how it is, why it is, anything at all that I can pick up on. And I just got this sense of giggling, of laughter. The flower was laughing, but it was very soft. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. They're actually giggling flower. I think there's like a phrase out there, God laughs in flowers or something like that. He does. And so fascinated, I ran to everybody else's flowers who weren't wilting and dying. And theirs were laughing but louder. And so I continued to check in on my flower because it was in water, but once you cut a flower, it's going on its way. And so it got softer and softer and softer, and then it just blended. It just all of a sudden left. But that's kind of the sense of it. That it's a tuning in, kind of like focusing your band to a certain station on the radio, and then allowing it to come toward you, and you sense it or feel it. For me, it was just this happy, smiling, giggling feeling from this flower. From other people, I learned how to pick up on the voice. At this point, I can pick up on a name. It's a matter of focus. So,
Wow. So that's yeah. You're going to get more silence coming from this end now. As I try and compute that. Well, that is what an empath is. That's very interesting.
There is actually one more piece worth mentioning.
Please do.
With the skilled empathy, I learned to tune in to the highest frequency that a person has. In a matter of speaking, it's kind of the soul level, where the soul is in the body. It's kind of that frequency that I tuned into when everything fell apart, and I went into the stillness. There's a light, a highest giggling tone, and you could say, for every person. Everybody's so beautifully unique. It's amazing. And when I work with people as the empathic coach, what I tune into is that. That's the thing I look at and sense first. And then we begin talking, and at times there's an off note where the frequency is slightly shifted from where it could be. Or there's an on note where it's rising toward what's possible. And that's how I choose to frame my questions that I use as a coach. I know that when you asked to do an interview, you said I'd like to interview a coach. And I think with all of my stories and your beginning question kind of threw your questions out the window a little bit. But to bring it back around, as a coach and a skilled empath, I've learned to tune into the giggling flower of each person and help them bring that forth. And so that's what I do. And that's why I love it so much, because everybody's so neat. I had been overwhelmed as a child by the pain and the fear and the disconnection and the total frantic, frenzied kind of nobody understanding who they are and what they're doing or anything else of my parents and da-da-da. But as I've worked with spirituality, with meditation, with everything else, and the empathic skill, I've come to understand that everybody's absolutely perfect. They're 100% where they're meant to be. And it's all about choice. That, whether you go left or right, either one's fine, but you got to choose. And when you choose, there's repercussions and you get to experience. And as a coach, I pretty much work with helping people tip toward life like I did. I think that's why I was so drawn to it. Because you can tip toward death. You can tip toward what doesn't serve you. You can tip toward things that hurt and continue the process of confusion and pain and disconnection. And that's an option. It's an uncomfortable one. I did it for a long time. But you can also tip toward life and opening up and accepting and trusting. And there's so much there. It's, that's the awesomeness that I chose to live when I did choose to live way back then. I just didn't know it at the time, but I felt it. So, yeah. So, on with the questions.
No, the questions have been thrown out long ago. But so what I was going to ask you about is with your clients. So I don't know what you call them, but when you're doing this, do you? Because your explanation of their, I don't know, higher self or the top most higher giggling frequency, as you put it. I'm paraphrasing, of course.
Yes, perfect.
Do you try to notice the areas where they're not realizing that potential and tip them towards living that potential? And does it work like that? And what happens in an average sort of session? Could I, if that's a good question?
That's a great question.
Thank you so much.
I did for the first 5 years or so. I worked as a healer, energy healer, intuitive. And I did help people tip toward. I would go up there and see what their potential was and help them tip toward it. However, in doing so, it was my choice. They were coming to see me because something was wrong. And that's fine. We all, generally our drives are about wanting more and wanting to shift things. We don't go to a healer because we're feeling well. Generally, we go because there's something wrong and we want it fixed. However, I was too involved in the process. I was using my will, my energy to tip the person, telling them what to do. And I'm not a doctor. I'm not the person who's supposed to be doing that. I'm not the person who's. I can be, but I decided that it was taking too much of my energy. I was taking on their stuff. I was taking responsibility for them. And it was just, I wouldn't say it was heavy, but that might be a good word. It was too much for me. Just one person after another, they started looking at me to answer their questions for them, and I was like, "Whoa, no, 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 we're not going there because I don't have any. I barely have the answers for myself." So I knew there was something off. I knew that there was something not quite jiving with who I am and what it is I want to do this lifetime that I chose to live. It's not telling people what to do or going up and seeing what their potential is and then telling them what way to go. Everybody has their own path. Everybody's walking their life. This is theirs. It's their will, their possession, their thing. The one thing that is absolutely their own. And they were handing it to me for a moment. And so what I ended up choosing to do was go into training as a coach. And I was so excited when I discovered the first thing you learn is to not take responsibility for your clients. That it's their life, it's their choices. What you can do is listen, which I do really well. And you can, and I am, the first thing I do become aware of is what's up there so that I can be aware of their highest giggling potential and hold that space for whatever comes next with the bearing witness to the highest giggling potential and then letting them do whatever it is that they do. And they choose all kinds of wonderful things. It is them that really knows the answers. They actually live into their highest potential all by themselves. And there actually came a point of trusting for me because I'd learned so much as a kid that everybody has no idea what's going on. So they're bouncing off of each other and freaking out most of the time. But not all the time. And I really needed to lean into that trust. It was a very vulnerable place for me, very uncomfortable to let people lead after I'd been for 5 years or so saying this is what you do and how you do it. But the growth and the shift in their life was so authentic and so owned at a really deep personal level that nothing compares to it. My telling them what to do, they're doing it because I told them. Them figuring it out for themselves, that's... Yeah, and there isn't even anything to figure out. There's just making the choice of their own will and their own origin. I guess would be a good word for it.
Okay. Yeah. So that's an interesting shift in the way you work there to just... it must have been easier. It must actually have been easier for you than the way it was before. But
yes, it was. It is a lot less heavy.
Yeah.
For that word, I wasn't taking it on myself, and I just got to watch. I got to watch the giggling unfold.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, you must have. This comes obviously. It must be your skill to get the people to do it that way, because obviously, if I just sat and listened, it wouldn't help anybody.
I don't know. I think you're doing your interviews. You're helping people.
Oh, well,
you're helping me. So
I'm sure this will help someone. I mean, I'm sure your story will help. And we'll never know, but we might get emails, and I'll pass them on to you if we do. But I'm sure. Well, I hope so. Anyway, we'll certainly see. The best thing to do now, Dawn, is to say, well, thank you very much. But can you now tell people listening, especially people. Are you in? Sorry,
Virginia.
Virginia.
Yeah, Reston, Virginia, right near D.C.
Of
20
course.
minutes from D.C., from the central point of a great deal of frantic focus.
Yes. We forget that's all there, and it's next to and I think Virginia's quite a beautiful place, isn't it? It's quite
It is.
quite
It
rural,
is.
and so that's where you are. But what I'd love to ask you is if you could tell everyone who's interested in meeting you or who is interested in you, so tell them how to get in touch with you through the web or whatever. That's what I'd love to do, because if I was in Virginia, I'd be banging at your door. Maybe I'd call you first.
I'd appreciate a call. Well, my new website is going live in March. It is theempathiccoach.com.
The Empathic Coach. And it is there at the moment, but
it is now. Yeah. It's just under construction, so you get to see the innards of the website as it's coming together. So maybe that'd be interesting. Who knows?
Yeah. I think it's good.
Yeah. Thanks. At the moment, I'm not doing live sessions. Just doing stuff over the phone, and I'm international. Yeah. So you speak English, I can talk to you. If you don't, we're kind of out of luck. But if you speak English, I can talk to you. You can reach me at dawn@loveisthere.com. That was my mom's last words when she was dying. I was with her, and she was holding her hand, and she kind of was having some trouble breathing, and she made sure that I could hear her. She's like, and she said, "Love is there," and she had that energy of the giggling frequency of as she was going, it was just like the flower. She was dissipating into all that is, and she said, "Love is there," and she wouldn't stop saying it until I repeated it to her. I said, "I get it. Love is there. I don't understand it yet, but I will." So my email address is dawn@loveisthere.com.
That's great. That's really interesting. Again, just asked you where to. I couldn't imagine a more interesting story behind an email address, quite frankly. So if anyone wants to get a hold of you, there's the empathiccoach.com and dawn@loveisthere.com.
Yep.
So Dawn, unless is there anything else you'd like to say before we unfortunately have to say goodbye to each other?
I will say that the thing to remember that makes life really comfortable, really happy, is that giggling potential, that frequency is there in everyone. Everybody is so beautiful, an absolute spark of pure amazingness, of essence, of God. If you want to use the God word, I believe in life and love. I choose to place my faith in life and love, and that everyone's plugged into that, and that everyone has that space, and that if you choose, you can see that in other people and yourself. And it has to start with you.
Okay. I think that's amazing, Dawn. I'm really pleased to have met you and spoken to you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. This has been awesome.